And good morning, and welcome to this morning's webinar, where I'll be joined by my colleagues Owen and Katie, who have got lots of knowledge and experience of the subject matter, which is how to cut carbon and energy without spending lots of money. Next slide, please. So my name's George Richards. I'm a director at JRP. I've been here for 14 years, background in energy and innovation. And Katie and Owen will introduce themselves, I'm sure, when they come to their sections. The first section we're going to come to, going to hand over to Katie in a minute to talk about the hidden costs of everyday habits before she hands the baton over to Owen. It's a bit of a double act today, talking about the identifying hidden energy costs in your operations and quick win behavioural changes that work. And then handing back to Katie to talk about how to measure and prove the savings, which is absolutely critical, of course, and maintaining engagement and momentum. Before then briefly handing back to me to talk about commercial advantages beyond energy bills. And then Owen will close off with next steps and practical takeaways. Now, at that point, there will be a QR code shown on screen, which will take you to a questionnaire talking about your own energy management. So if you take a few minutes to complete that, that would be great. And Owen will touch on that a little bit more when it gets to that point. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know JRP, and I'd be surprised if there's many of you that don't, we've been around since 1999, so we're not new kids on the block. And we're regarded as being the UK's leading independent energy, net zero and outsourcing specialists. What makes us different, I guess, is a couple of things. We're uniquely practical, pragmatic and highly experienced, and that's because we've worked in a number of different environments as we work across different sectors, from engineering and aerospace to food and drink, healthcare, pharma, chemicals, education, and everything in between. We're supplier and technology agnostic, which helps us to be our client's trusted advisor. So in other words, we're not selling anything. And we help organizations to develop and implement appropriate and practical net zero strategies, which really started about 5 or 6 years ago. And we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We're a B Corp certified organization, have been for a number of years now, and we have a net zero target to achieve by 2030, and we're well on track to doing that. And you can see some of the organizations that we work with, some of whom we've worked with for many years, but they're from across the spectrum, as you'd expect. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you an overview of what JRP do, and I'll start with data solutions up in the top right-hand corner there, because that's the starting point for us, is getting your data in the right place. That's not about getting lots of detail necessarily, but it's about just getting consistently good quality data, whether it's around energy and or carbon or indeed water, and then analysing it and reporting it in a way that's useful to your key stakeholders. So that's always our starting point. Optimize existing systems, make them work for you. But then, of course, energy management has been the core of our business ever since our establishment in 1999. And we do everything around energy except supply it. So that's from regulatory compliance, such as ESOS, SCCR, audits, things like ISO 50001, etc. And then, of course, more latterly, the net zero and climate resilience. Climate resilience is becoming a hot topic of conversation, and we could talk about all these things in more depth another time. Please feel free to reach out to us if any of these areas are of particular interest to you. Asset management, as we call it, was previously called facilities management outsourcing. It was the first piece of major work we did was for Rolls-Royce back in 1999/2000. It seems an eon ago now. But that was very effective. It took £400 million of costs out of their business costs, but improved internal customer satisfaction rating went from 43% to 91%. So two key measures of a very successful strategy. And we've helped numerous organizations with projects and asset management strategies over the years. Project implementation is where we apply our practical knowledge and experience to help companies such as Domino's, as an example, where we help with the installation of 2 solar arrays on 2 of their manufacturing sites. And then, of course, ESG, which is what you might want to call sustainability. which is everything beyond net zero. And now I'm going to hand over to Katie. Next slide, please.
Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. Morning, everyone. I'm Katie Almer. I've been working for JRP for a couple of years as an energy consultant. Been working in the industry over 25 years, probably more than that. I'm also an ESOS lead assessor. Next slide, please. I want to talk briefly about profit impact of small changes to the business, so mainly focusing on your people. So yeah, an overview of how people can have a massive influence on energy reduction. So when we think about saving energy, there's a much faster and often more cost-effective route than the more traditional investment route, so that people, the way staff use, manage and think about energy, it actually can influence up to 70% of a building's total energy use. And that's why influencing behaviours has such a strong impact on a business's bottom line. For every kilowatt hour we avoid using and a direct reduction in carbon emissions, it's immediate, it's low cost, and it can deliver consistent savings of 5 to 15%, and that's without any capital investment. So when you add that all up across multiple sites, people and processes, it's substantial. Some are small actions, but they are cumulative, and key is once it's embedded into an organisation's culture, it improves margins, resilience, and importantly, it also helps reduce exposure to volatile energy prices. Next slide, please. Yeah, what's really powerful of this sort of people focus approach is it drives and delivers real lasting results done well. Difference that comes from people is how they use, manage and think about energy every day across different functions of the business. So if we take things like operational and equipment use, it's how systems are set up and operated, and often it's not new technology that's needed, but it's getting the most out of what's already there. And then in terms of workplace practices, it's the small daily actions that make the big difference. So lighting, heating, switch off routines, how you use these things. And then when people understand their impact, they take more ownership, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Monitoring and feedback, so it's when people can actually see the results of their actions. It really does build momentum. Sharing clear, meaningful feedback keeps energy saving visible and really rewarding, which again I'm going to talk about later on in the webinar. Leadership and engagement is really crucial. Culture and culture shift starts from the top. When leaders talk about energy and recognise good practice, it becomes really how part of how the organisation operates. And then there's travel, logistics and site management. Optimizing how buildings and transport are used rounds out the whole story. But really the key is pulling all of these functions together and looking at the whole picture, not just isolated actions. So it's when energy awareness becomes part of everyday decision making, the organisation becomes a lot more energy conscious, which is where everyone understands their role, feels empowered to act and sees the benefits. The results are really impressive. Just take an example. We've worked with Rolls-Royce and implementing some awareness measures across all of these functions alone actually cut energy use by nearly 9%, around £2 million a year savings, and it was achieved at a minimal cost and a payback of only 3 months. So that's the sort of thing that happens when you shift to a people-led culture. And empowering everyone to think energy first. When that happens, savings keep on coming. Next slide, please. These are just a few examples of where a more sort of holistic energy awareness program or energy awareness actions have been implemented across loads of multiple sectors, and you can see there's real measurable results there. So education, transport, telecoms, hospitality, public sector. Next slide, please. So yeah, when people can pay back faster than technology, when we do think about energy savings, our minds often sort of jump straight to tech, things like LED lighting, heat pumps, solar panels. But really the key message and the key takeaway from this session is that people can deliver savings a lot faster. These actions often have no direct capital cost, and the return on investment can be almost immediate, often within weeks, and typically within 6 months or even less. And if that's compared to 2 to 5 years for a technology upgrade, the moment people become aware of their impact, savings starts to appear simply through better habits and smarter operation of what's already there. And then when you embed those behaviours into the culture of the organisation, the benefits last, even when the new technology is installed. So those habits keep delivering value, and making sure the investment works as hard as possible. So it's not just about cost savings, it's about creating a lasting culture of accountability and improvement where everyone in the organisation feels part of the solution. So while technology enables progress, it's actually people who unlock it, and that's definitely why behaviour change pays faster than tech. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Owen Jones. I'm Technical Director at JRP Solutions. So I'd just like to go through sort of some practical things you can potentially do to help reduce your energy consumption. So next slide, please. So first thing is to understand where your energy is being used in your organization or on your site. So identifying the significant energy users, the SEUs, and focusing on those. So you're targeting areas potentially where the main energy is being used. So and then you can start to check to see if those processes or those bits of equipment are being used correctly or not. Another really good idea is fairly basic, but is to do something like an out of hours walk round. So at the end of the day, after people have left either the office or the factory, have a walk round, see what's been left on. Are the lights left on? Are there bits of equipment left on? And can these be turned off? So that's a fairly quick way of identifying quick wins without spending any money. I'd also look, is equipment being left on, not necessarily out of hours, but even during the day or during the working shift, that doesn't need to be left on. So are there empty rooms with the lights on and air conditioning on? Are conveyors left running for significant lengths of time without any product on them in a production line? So next slide, please. So also you can look at equipment. Is there equipment that uses those, one of your significant energy users that uses high amounts of energy? Is that left at full power for significant lengths of time where it's not doing any productive work? So for instance, you could have extraction in a kitchen area, and you need high levels of extraction when you're doing lots of cooking, producing lots of smells and fumes. But maybe earlier on in the day, you're just doing prep work. You're just peeling vegetables and cutting up vegetables. You don't need high levels of extraction for that work. So the extraction could be turned down during those periods. And the same with production. You might have production where a lot of dust is being produced at a certain time when a certain process is going on. But when that process isn't running, you don't need necessarily the same levels of extraction. So can that be turned down if it's safe to do so? Same things with ovens and furnaces. Again, sometimes these will be left on during the day when there's nothing in them. And if they're going to be left on for a period of time, you don't necessarily want to turn them off completely because they'll take a long time to warm back up. But can you turn them down? If there's nothing going to be in the oven for an hour, can you turn it down 20, 30 degrees and then 5-10 minutes before you need it, turn it back up again? So there's those sort of things. Looking at controls, are the set points and the levels that you've got for bits of equipment appropriate for the task and the occupancy that's going on? So for instance, in an office, you would set the temperature to control to roughly around 21 degrees C because it's sort of sedentary work. But in a warehouse where the occupants are producing manual work, doing manual work, you don't need 21 degrees C. Probably 15, 16 degrees C would be appropriate for that situation. So making sure the setting is appropriate for the situation and the task at hand. So again, lighting levels sometimes can be significantly higher, especially if you've had LED replacements. So lighting level in an office should be sort of 600 to 700 lux. But lighting level in a corridor probably only needs to be about 300-400 lux. So if you've got the same level lighting in your corridor as you have in your offices, you're wasting energy. Next slide, please. So we can also look at data analysis. So this is just some very basic. You can get very complicated with data analysis for doing, regression analysis, having full automated monitoring and targeting systems. But for some very basic things you can look at, it's just comparing this year versus last year. So what we consume in October last year against what we consumed in October this year. Has it increased? Has it decreased? And why has that happened? And once you've identified there's an issue, potentially identify why it happened, and then what can you do about it and make sure you act on that information. Another way of doing that is looking at a moving annual target. This is where you take a summation of 12 months of data and you plot that every month. So you're plotting the last 12 months of data every month. And what you can see is if that line starts to increase, if the gradient goes up and it's going up, then your month on month, you're using more energy, and you need to understand why that is, and then investigate that, and then implement things if appropriate to try and bring that down. If the line's flat, then you're just using the same energy month on month, and that's not necessarily a problem. If it's going down, then you're actually saving energy. You're using less energy. And again, you want to understand why that's happening and make sure you can repeat that going forwards. And one thing to mention on this is use kilowatt hours. Don't use cost if you can help it, because costs can change. The unit price will change. The standing charges within your bill will change. So try and make sure you're using kilowatt hours when you're doing energy analysis. Right, next slide, please. So this is something a little bit more complicated, but I thought it was worth mentioning. So this is half-hour data. So most companies now can get half-hour electrical data. Some may be able to get half-hour gas data as well, or hourly gas data. And this is really powerful. If you can get this off your utility supplier, quite often you can download it off the utility supplier website. You can plot this and it will show you a profile of what your facility or building, the electricity profile throughout the day. So what this graph's showing is it's showing different days of the week and the profile through that day. And it's also showing the profile on Christmas Day. So there's some really good information you can get from this, really simply. So first, there's the little peak on the right-hand side in the purple line. Why is that little blip there? Has something been turned on out of hours? So what we've got here is we've got profile through the day. So it's overnight when the building's shut up until probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Then we've got a shoulder where it ramps up. At about 9 o'clock, it's at load for the day. It stays there probably till about sort of 4:30, 5, and then drops back down to the overnight consumption. So the other thing we can look at is what's happening with the overnight consumption. So during the week, we're using 5 to 5,500 kilowatts on average. But at the weekend, we're only using just over 4,000 kilowatts. And at Christmas Day, we're only using 3,500 kilowatts. So why is that? Why is we using more overnight during the week than we are at the weekend? And why are we using more at the weekend than we are at Christmas Day? What was turned off on Christmas Day that isn't turned off at the other times? And trying to understand that, and then trying to drive the best practice for the out of hours consumption. The other thing we can see here is the weekday, we've got quite a high consumption, so about 7,500, except for Friday where everyone knocks off at lunchtime by the looks of things. And then you've got a bit of consumption all the way through the day on Saturday. So is the offices occupied on Saturday, or is the building occupied on Saturday? But you've also got consumption as well during the day on the Sunday. Now, pardon me, assuming the office or the building is shut on the Sunday, why are you getting that consumption on a Sunday? Is there some timers or some automatic timers that are turning equipment on the Sunday when it's not needed? Possibly. So this data is really powerful. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. So here's some really basic things you can do to help save energy. Pardon me. Energy policy. So you want to make sure you've got an energy policy. This potentially could be part of your environmental policy, but what you need to make sure is there is a good policy put together that people's responsibilities are well defined within that policy, and it's well communicated to all levels of the business, all the way from the board, the directors, all the way through senior management, all the way down to the shop floor, and people know what their responsibilities are and what the policy of the business is. Part of that, or another policy that's really useful, is having a good purchasing policy around energy and making sure your purchasing policy is in place. So you're not looking at just buying the cheapest bit of equipment you can when you're buying new bits of equipment, but you're looking at the life cycle cost of that bit of equipment, how much energy it will use over its life, and how that affects the lifetime cost of that bit of equipment or that service you're buying. And one thing that really helps with this is setting an internal carbon price, which will, so if you set, say, £50 a tonne for your internal carbon price, that will then feed into the life cycle cost of that particular product, and the products that use less energy, produce less carbon, will then have a better life cycle cost. Pardon me, sorry. Motor replacement policy. Again, if you've got a lot of electric motors on site, having a policy in place on how to deal with those when they need replacement or they need repair. So if you rewind a motor, you should only rewind it 3 times before you replace it, because every time you rewind it, the efficiency goes down. Repair it, the efficiency goes down. Look at size of motors. Is the size of the motor, don't just do a like-for-like replacement, is the size of the motor correct for the application? Because quite often they're oversized, especially older motors. So can you buy a smaller motor that's going to have a cheaper capital cost? And alternatively, as well, also look at the efficiency of the motor. So don't just do, again, like-for-like replacements. If you've got a IE2 low efficiency motor, don't just replace it with the same. Again, look, can you buy a slightly more expensive but more efficient IE4 motor, which will have a slightly higher capital cost, but will actually have a much lower life cycle cost because it's using less energy. Shutdown checklists. This is really good. So understand on a process or in an office or in a building, what can be shut down at the end of the day. Again, this is where that half-hour data analysis comes in. You understand what can be turned off at the end of the day, and making sure then you've got a checklist that the last person leaving the building or the person who's shutting down the process can turn that off. And things, certainly on a process side of things, you get lots of things like hydraulic power packs not being turned off, or compressed air not being isolated from machines. So you've got continuous leaks through the night from the compressed air system, even though the machine's not running. Another really important thing is an energy opportunities database. So making sure you're recording all of the opportunities you've identified within the business. And even if they're, you reject them or they're not valid at the time, keep those in the database, keep reviewing them, because things change, energy prices change, technology changes, and those opportunities may come back in. And regular review and regular updates of an energy opportunity database is quite a powerful thing to do. JRP do have a tool, a project activator, that can help with that if that's something you're interested in. And finally, from an investment point of view, having a ring-fence budget for energy efficiency means that projects are more likely to go ahead because they're not competing with other infrastructure and capital projects for funding. Okay, next slide, please. So empowering staff. one easy way is, once you've understood what equipment can be turned off, either at the end of the day or at the end of the shift, or when it's not being used, label it. Because then if somebody sees a pump running, or some extraction running, and there's nobody in the area, and if it's labeled, this can be turned off, then they know they can turn it off without causing any major issues. So label stuff that can be turned off safely, and you can also label stuff that can't be turned off as well, to make sure things that aren't, people don't turn off stuff they shouldn't. So a suggestion scheme, again, it's fairly basic stuff, but it can be really powerful. One of the big things is, sort of looking at where stuff's being left on, or doors and windows being left open, but also compressed air leaks that can be very expensive for industry. Making sure that your people are spotting those, looking out for those, and feeding those back. And the main thing about suggestion scheme is making sure that you feed back on the suggestions that are made to the person who's made the suggestion. Even if it doesn't go ahead, even if it doesn't come to anything, you should still be making sure you feed back, let them know what you've done, how you've considered it, and what the outcome of their suggestion was, because that will then encourage them to continue feeding back into that scheme, suggestions into that scheme. Otherwise, what happens is they'll decide that nothing's being done with their suggestions, and they'll stop giving them. Energy training, relatively inexpensive to do, but quite critical. I would always recommend to make sure that you've got energy training in your new starter induction. So from day one, new starters understand that energy is important to you and important to your business. But making sure as well that training is refreshed on a regular basis. Ensuring that you've got responsible people within your site or within your business for energy. People have got responsibility, so you can make that part of their job description if necessary. But it's surprising the amount of companies I go to, and there's nobody specifically designated with responsibility for energy officially, which then there's nobody running it, nobody championing it. So creating energy teams and energy champions within the business as well can have a significant impact. And one that I think is really powerful as well, if you've got a larger organization with multiple sites, creating an inter-site forum between the different sites so they can share ideas, share good practice that they've done. One person could do the investigation into a particular type of project, particular type of energy saving, and then they can implement that, find out if it works or not, and then they can feed that and propagate that through the rest of the business through an inter-site forum. Okay, next slide, please. And finally, communication. So you need to keep communicating about energy. So you want regular reports once a month, once a week, on what's happening with energy within the business, how you're doing against any targets you've set, what projects you've done, communicating your wins, where have you had successes, where have you had failures, what the best practices around certain processes and certain things as well. Inter-site forum I've mentioned before, and the big one I think is making sure energy is on the agenda. So if you've got meetings, if you've got a annual board meeting, if you've got monthly management team meetings, or if you've got a daily shift meeting, put energy on the agenda as an agenda item. It may not be discussed much. It may just be, oh, what's happened on energy today, or we haven't done a lot, but it will be there on the agenda the following day, and it makes sure that it is getting discussed and is getting talked about. Okay, next slide, please. I think that's it. So I'll pass over to Katie now, who's going to talk about how to measure and prove savings. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, as Owen said, I'm just going to have a look at how to measure and prove the savings. So next slide, please. So why does measurement matter? I'd say one of the biggest drivers of lasting behaviour change in terms of energy reduction and energy efficiency is proof. People need to see that their actions are genuinely making a difference. When staff can see energy use actually falling because of something they've done, it will turn awareness into motivation. So a simple example of a warehouse that cuts its out of hours electricity use by 12%, and that's just by tightening up lockup procedures and switch off. No new equipment, no investment. Something they'd only discovered because they'd tracked their half-hourly data, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, and could see exactly where the energy was being used. Without measuring something like that, those results would never have been noticed. Leadership might have dismissed modifying behaviours, changing cultures as something soft or hard to quantify and just dismissed it. But once you put numbers behind it, it becomes really valuable to the business. Visible savings, clear impact, and a powerful case for continuing to invest in people as part of the energy strategy. So in other words, data is not about proving success, it's something people start believing in. Next slide, please. So in terms of data sources, to make energy behaviour change meaningful, you need the right data and tools. The good news is most organisations already have it, but don't necessarily use it. So some examples: half-hourly meters. Smart meters automatically record energy use every 30 minutes, obviously. They're already fitted in most medium to large sites, and the data they provide is really useful, as Owen touched upon in the previous session. They reveal baseline patterns, and by showing how energy use changes throughout the day and night, they're really important at helping identify waste. So yeah, the Christmas Day example, like equipment running when it shouldn't, or excessive weekend or consumption over holidays or shutdowns. Building management systems, BMS, they're control systems that manage things like heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lighting. They also collect detailed information and allow you to set schedules and control settings centrally. Analysing this data can highlight key clashes, such as heating and cooling operating at the same time. Things like gradual comfort creep, it's where temperature settings can slowly drift and energy use rises without anyone really noticing. So the key takeaways: most organisations have powerful data and tools at their fingertips. It's about having the correct resources, people and processes in place to use that information to spot patterns, uncover waste, and give people the actual evidence they need to act and escalate it further up. Alongside half-hourly meters and BMS, there's some other useful tools that make energy data more visible and actionable. So dashboards and sub-metering is a really good place to start. Dashboards are cloud-based platforms, and they're really useful in bringing energy data together in one place. They can let everyone see what's happening, from overall performance down to individual areas or even a piece of equipment. And they go a step further by measuring energy use for specific circuits or equipment like refrigeration units, ovens, server rooms, and they're brilliant at spotting energy hogs, so areas that quietly drive up consumption. And then once those patterns are identified, it becomes a lot easier to target action and actually engage staff in making changes. And then there's other things like smart plugs and data loggers. These are smaller, low-cost devices, and they track how much energy individual items use. They're great for smaller equipment or things like office plug loads that might otherwise go unnoticed. Critically, data alone doesn't save energy. So if there's no actual regular process for reviewing the data, no one trained up and responsible for interpreting what it means, and no clear route for escalating issues or acting on insights, then even the best of these technologies won't deliver any real change. So the value in this is where data, people and process work together. When someone owns the data, discusses it regularly, as Owen touched on, and drives decisions based on what it shows, that's when all of these really brilliant tools turn from sort of passive information sources into supporting more continuous improvement. And it really does empower teams, shows opportunities, and helps embed sort of an energy conscious mindset across the whole organisation. Next slide, please. So yeah, final piece of the puzzle, it's making all of this data meaningful. So when we talk to site teams or leadership, it's not really enough to say we saved energy. It needs to be translated into something tangible, not necessarily cost, because yeah, as Owen said, costs change all the time. It's volatile, but it is useful. But also importantly, kilowatt hours and carbon dioxide equivalent. These are the things that make people sit up and take notice. So you could say, turning off 100 PCs overnight could save roughly £1,500 a year and cut 15 tonnes of CO2. Suddenly, that's not something that's an abstract sustainability message, it's financial and it links directly to the bottom line. So it's using examples like that, they're really powerful. And then, yeah, like on the slide here, before and after visuals. So you can show a simple graph of your overnight base load or over the holiday period and highlight any anomalies there. And you can literally see a step change when an energy control measure kicks in as well. So you can plot that graphically, whether it's something like automated lighting, HVAC scheduling, or an IT shutdown routine. Finally, not to let the data sit in isolation. It's great to be fed back regularly, especially with ESOS. Don't know if you're all aware of it, Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme can feed into those annual progress reports and action plans. It keeps them nice and live. Streamlined energy and carbon reporting, or if ISO 50001 systems. So when you demonstrate verified savings and the return on investment, it gives it credibility, not just internally to finance and leadership, but also to your customers, auditors, regulators. So yeah, going back to ESOS and SECA. Yeah, so energy efficiency stops just being about an operational task, it becomes more strategic. Next slide, please. So yeah, looking at recognition is one of those really powerful ways to keep energy efficiency programs alive and relevant. So there's loads of different ways of sharing results, newsletters, dashboards. Some companies have an energy champion of the month feature. Just things like that helps people see that their actions are noticed and values. And yeah, public recognition often drives a lot more engagement, a lot more than financial rewards, and it taps into pride and teamwork a lot of the time. Some companies have saved thousands just by recognising staff who consistently follow good energy practices. It works well with logistics and things like forklift drivers who make a point of switching chargers off properly, people adhering to eco driving techniques, and has been mentioned before, what is increasingly popular is organisations introducing internal carbon price. So it typically would be somewhere between 50 to 100 pounds a tonne of CO2. So what that means is they assign a notional financial value to every tonne of carbon saved. It doesn't always involve actual payments, but it just gives the company a clear, tangible way to connect environmental impact with business performance. So when a department reduces emissions through smarter practices, they're not just cutting energy, they're delivering measurable value. So if they cut 100 tonnes of CO2 and the company values carbon at £80 a tonne, that's £8,000 of benefit for the team that's been created. Next slide, please. So yeah, putting carbon and energy doesn't always need to be a big investment. It's about getting more value from what you already have. So when an organisation builds a culture around smart energy use and accountability, it really does quickly become a commercial advantage. Strengthens competitive position, demonstrating strong energy and carbon performance, and enhances reputation with clients, helps with customer attraction and retention. I know it features a lot in more sort of repeat business and tender requirements. Clear people benefit. It does recognition programs that reward practical energy saving ideas, create pride engagement. A lot of younger staff graduates do like to be part of more of a forward-thinking organisation. On the risk side, there's operational resilience to be considered as well, reducing exposure to price volatility and staying ahead of tightening carbon legislation. And then financially, it's about visibility. Again, by assigning things like a simple internal value to carbon savings, can translate actions into clear business terms. So it's not just about compliance, it's about smart business. And when energy and carbon management are part of the culture of the business, not just a separate project, you can start unlocking savings continuously and makes the organisation a lot leaner, more efficient and better positioned for the future. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about maintaining engagement and momentum. Next slide, please. So yeah, how is this all maintained? I think one of the biggest challenges with promoting more energy efficient behaviours is keeping it going. Most energy saving campaigns do start really strong. There's lots of enthusiasm, great communication, maybe even a bit of friendly competition between teams, but a lot of the time after a few weeks, that sort of initial energy starts to fade. So it's really important to keep things fresh, new ideas, regular reminders, visible progress. People want to know what they're doing still matters and that their actions are making a real difference. So to give an example, say an office achieving around a 10% drop in energy use in the first brilliant, just through awareness and simple actions. But say by month 3, those savings had slipped away. But once the team reintroduced short monthly updates, started sharing feedback, having lunch and learn sessions, simple dashboards, the engagement and the savings came back, and it's just keeping that momentum going. So the message really is behaviour change, energy efficient programs. They're not just projects with an end date. It's an ongoing conversation. Next slide, please. The good news is that some of the most effective approaches are the simplest and cheapest to implement. So first, visual feedback. People stay engaged when they can see the results of their actions. Some organisations have live energy data on screens, say in reception areas. Others have weekly comparisons on dashboards, posters, staff spaces. It's basic psychology. And then next, friendly competition. As I said, a bit of friendly rivalry is quite good. Energy monthly league tables, switch off champions, making it fun. And then finally, small incentives. Coffee vouchers, a green day off, which would be quite nice, or even public thank yous go a really long way. So it's all about visibility, recognition, connection, so helping people see the results and feel really valued. All helps build momentum and make sure it becomes part of the norm, part of everyday work, life and practice. Next slide, please. Making it relevant. So yeah, this is a good takeaway slide. So what we found, and personally what I find, one of the simplest and most effective ways to drive an energy saving culture is to make it really personal. So if people can connect what happens at work with what they recognise at home, it's really powerful. So if you explain energy use in familiar terms like comfort, cost, waste, people instantly understand the impact. And I've put some examples up there of things you do at work and things you do at home. And it's all about finding hidden users, machines, chargers and systems quietly running 24/7, showing small changes that can really make a big difference across a site or an entire organisation. When you link those actions back to the bigger picture, so every kilowatt hour contributes directly to reduce costs and lower emissions, people begin to see that energy savings isn't just about a sustainability goal, it makes really good business sense. And when people can relate energy savings behaviours at work to the choices they make at home, again, it stops like feeling like some nebulous, abstract sustainability initiative. It becomes everyday common sense, gives people a sense of ownership. And so, yeah, that's really the key message. Cutting carbon and energy doesn't have to mean big spending or complex technology. It starts with people, with awareness, consistency and connection. And when everyone understands their impact and really feels genuinely part of the solution, the savings will flow naturally and they last. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Owen. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about commercial advantages beyond energy bills. We've heard some really good tips from both Katie and Owen there. Next slide, please. Okay, so only got one slide, so I'm not going to give death by PowerPoint. Clearly, some of the non-commercial benefits includes obviously helping to reduce GHG emissions, strengthens bids, particularly in the public sector. We're seeing increasing condition of bids, of tenders, that you've got to have a carbon reduction plan at the very least. It does also help to positively change an organisation's DNA. Katie mentioned earlier that change has to start at the top. So if you see the behaviours from the senior management team changing for the better, then it does help to reinforce the message at the grassroots, if you like. It also helps to demonstrate a willingness to change. I think it's really important particularly in large organizations who aren't as agile, if you like, as SMEs, but being able to adapt new ways of working, new processes, etc., really does help to reflect on their reputation and brand. And it supports, of course, ISO 50001, which calls for continual improvement, and energy training is part of that. If you think about some of the things we talked about, awareness training, and it doesn't have to be very technical or detailed, but if any of you have ever been into a factory environment, a manufacturing environment, and you'll hear that white noise, if you like, constant noise going on from machines, etc. Well, hidden within there quite often is air compressed leaks or steam leaks. Steam leaks at least can be seen as long as they're not under roof void. Air leaks can't be seen, but they can be heard. But you need to have a little bit of energy awareness training to understand what that sounds like. And then you need to have supporting processes and procedures in place to ensure that they are then dealt with. Because if you think about compressed air, most expensive utility on a site, if a leak goes undetected for, say, 12 months until you have your next air leak survey, that's 12 months worth of leak. That's an expensive cost to the business that could have been avoided. And of course, the leaks, the longer the longer they're left, the worse they get. So dealing with them in good time is really important. So it's not just about the energy awareness training; it's then having the service level agreement in place with the relevant maintenance team to make sure that they deal with that once it's reported within, say, shift or within 24 hours or whatever the case may be. And of course, by dealing with all these inefficiencies, it increases the overall plant efficiency. It extends the asset life as well, because you're maintaining things better. You've improved the maintenance regimes, and you get reduced plant failure, so you'll get less downtime. And that's really important, particularly on a 24/7-hour site, where you can't afford to have any downtime at all because there's no way of recovering it. And it also helps to demonstrate value to the senior management team. There are other things as well. I think one of the other things that I thought about, which we've encountered, particularly in office environments, is what the energy data will tell you is small power use, particularly out of hours, and even in normal working hours. And what I mean by small power usage, I'm sure we've all seen it, where people will bring in their own under the desk fan heaters. Well, that's fine and dandy, but you're trying to control that office to or environment to a given temperature for good reasons, to reduce energy consumption. And those fan heaters, what not only are inefficient, but they probably haven't been pat tested either, so they do present a safety risk, and particularly if they're then left on overnight, because they can overheat and cause fires. So lots of reasons why data will tell you lots of things that's going on within your organization. And I'm handing over to Owen now, I believe. So next slide.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so hopefully, we've given you lots of information and tips on how you can reduce your energy consumption of your organization and your business without hopefully spending too much money. Some fairly simple things, I think, there, but worth stating. And hopefully that's inspired you to go out and do a few of those things and improve your energy consumption. At JRP Solution, we are available on hand to help you with this if you need it, and give you tailored advice for your specific organization. I mean, one of the things that be quite good is we've set up a energy management gap analysis questionnaire. It's only short, it's only 5 questions, but they're fairly in depth, but it should only take about 5 minutes to complete, and I think I would really recommend doing that. What you will get from that as well is we will feed back to you via email with some tailored responses to the outcome of your questionnaire, which will help you focus in on where you can make the most impact. And we will also be talking to a selected 20 or so respondents as well, one-to-one, to give them some specific one-to-one intervention as well, and that will be selected on a random basis. Well, I'd like to just say thank you all for listening, and I definitely recommend do the questionnaire. That'll be really useful. Okay, I think we've probably got some questions now, have we?
We have a couple of questions indeed, which I will take. Okay, so the first one is, what's the first or most cost-effective step a small business should take to begin cutting carbon and energy use? Katie, do you want to answer that? Or Erin, I don't mind.
Well, understanding how you're using energy, that's the main drive. If you don't know where the energy is going, it's very difficult to save it. So you need to understand how you're using the energy and what time of day you're using the energy. So it's about getting the data initially to understand where the energy is going, and then you can then focus in on where the potential waste is. But really, the first step is always understanding the energy and where the energy is going.
Okay. And the second question is, how do you prioritize which projects to implement first?
Well, again, you want to implement the ones that have the least cost at the biggest impact, don't you? Really, but it also depends on what your drivers from your organisation are. But yeah, really, you'd be looking at what's it going to cost us to implement this project, and how much energy is it going to save, and what is that going to save in cost and carbon, and prioritising those. You can look at simple payback. So if you've got an investment, how long will it take for that investment to be paid back by the energy savings and carbon savings, and help you to use that to prioritize your opportunities as well. Yeah.
And Katie, one for you. In your view, what are the common pitfalls or mistakes organisations make when trying to cut carbon and energy through people-powered changes?
I think, like I said in my previous slides, it's all about keeping momentum. So it's great when, some of these programs start off with, lots of staff buy-in, lots of initiatives and that sort of thing. But if communication isn't kept up and the excitement and motivation levels kept up, then these things will just inevitably fall flat on their face, because people forget about them and move on to the next thing. And it's all about making sure that it's just embedded into everyone's everyday work life thinking, just, it's just side by side with their job. And as I mentioned, if you make it relevant to what they do at home, they'll bring that into the workplace.
Okay. And another question that's just come in, bearing in mind the big picture, what's your opinion on the direction of travel of energy costs, especially with regards to more sustainable forms of energy? I have my view on that, but Owen?
Go for it.
Well, I mean, energy is driven by lots of global energy prices, driven by lots of global factors. The ideal is that with more renewable energy coming online, that prices will stabilize. There'll be less impact from wars and disturbance elsewhere in the world. But we're still quite a long way from that, and I don't think is having a bit of an impact at the moment. But again, a lot of the renewable energy can come at a premium price. Certainly the nuclear facilities new nuclear facilities are going in, they're good, reliable baseload energy, but they are quite costly. So energy prices aren't going to be coming down anytime soon. I wouldn't have thought, not significantly, and they probably will continue to increase for a while. But hopefully, if the government gets the policies right and more renewables come online, and there's a good spread of sources of energy into the market, then prices hopefully should stabilize going forward.
I would agree with you, except that the grid needs to be reinforced before renewables can really have that significant impact on prices.
And that's the other option as well, is the infrastructure in this country isn't necessarily up to scratch at the moment.
So given that the trend is likely to be continue to be upwards overall, you'll get the odd dip in that, but generally it's an upward trend. it even stresses even more the importance of behavior change, because it's, as I said, low cost, no cost things to do. Prioritize those things that cost you almost nothing to do. If it's changes to processes or behaviors, then just get on and do it. That's a simple message, to be frank about it. And if you need help, then we're always there, and there are obviously others in the marketplace that can also help you. But just to finish off by saying thank you very much for attending today's webinar. Hope you found it useful, and please don't forget to do the gap analysis as Owen mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.